Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to the channel. You should never buy a new car, ever. Well, at least that's the common belief in the personal finance space. And there's no doubt about it, a vehicle can absolutely be a huge wealth killer. I've done a video where I've talked about this in depth that I will link down below if you're interested. Susie Orman is quoted as saying, "Your goal should be to buy the least expensive car. Period. That should steer you to a used car rather than a new car. Every dollar you don't spend on a down payment and a monthly loan payment is a dollar that is available for all sorts of other uses." And I actually wholeheartedly agree with the second part of that statement. Every dollar that you don't put down towards a vehicle or assign to a payment, you actually free up to put towards other uses. And being that the number of dollars we have is finite, it's best to keep our fixed expenses low. By keeping your fixed expenses low, you create freedom in your budget and choices in your life. The more debts you sign yourself up for, the more restrictions you put on your life, the more obligations you give yourself, the less choices you give yourself. Then you have the Dave Ramsey team over at Ramsey Solutions saying, "We're not going to beat around the bush. You're always going to be better off buying used and paying up front instead of going for the shiny new model that some over-caffeinated car salesman is trying to get you to borrow money for." And those are some pretty strong words. Should you really never buy a new car, or should you always buy a used car? Actually, Dave Ramsey doesn't say you should never buy a new car. He says, don't buy a new car until you have at least $1 million net worth. And that's a pretty aggressive goal, being that only about 9% of US adults are actually millionaires. That's saying that the vast majority of people should never buy a new car. But you know what the vast majority of people should do? Take a moment to hit like and subscribe because it really does help out the video. Well, last year there were almost 14 million new cars sold in America. And we can probably assume that all 14 million of those vehicles were not sold to millionaires. So did millions of people just make a mistake? Just why are big finance personalities against buying new vehicles? Well, quite frankly, they are very expensive.
Well, finding an affordable new car is harder than ever. The average new vehicle in the U.S. costs, get this, $48,000.
And a hefty percentage of new vehicles are purchased using financing, often resulting in very big monthly payments. The average monthly car payment for new cars is $729. The average monthly car payment for a used vehicle is $528. And a record 17.5% of buyers purchasing new cars in the third quarter are paying more than $1,000 a month for their vehicle. And being that the median household income is about $75,000 a year, you can easily see how these payments end up eating up a huge portion of the average monthly budget for a typical household. But worse than their hefty price tag is that by and large, vehicles are depreciating assets, and that depreciation happens rather quickly. It's estimated that vehicles lose about 15% of their value within the first year, and within the first 5 years, about 50% of their value. There are actually car depreciation calculators that you can use to estimate how much a vehicle depreciates over time. I will link one from Progressive down below. So if you're watching your dollars and you're trying to make the most effective use of your dollars, you can see why so many financial pros advocate for buying a gently used vehicle. Allow someone else to take that initial hit on depreciation, you buy that gently used vehicle at a reduced price, and then hopefully drive it for many, many years to come. I wholeheartedly agree with the sentiment on a lot of levels. In a lot of ways, I think buying a used vehicle can be a great purchase decision. But I don't necessarily agree with the statement that you should never buy a new car or that a used car is always the better choice. And I think anytime you hear the words always or never, your ears should perk up. You should question the statement. A lot of this comes down to your financial situation. And no, I don't think you need to be a millionaire to buy a new vehicle. A lot of it really depends on the type of vehicle you're looking at. Personally, I drive a vehicle that is 16 years old. My Jeep is from 2008. Guess what? I bought it brand new, and I love my car. But when it comes time to buy a new one, I will likely buy brand new. Why? Because I want to, and because I have the means to do so. Let's talk vehicle prices. Let's start out with a Jeep as an example, simply because that's what I drive. If you're in the market to buy a brand new 2024 Jeep Grand Cherokee, it's going to run you anywhere from $40,000 to $67,000. That's a darn hefty price tag. But if I look up Jeep Grand Cherokees that are gently used in that 3, 4, or 5-year-old range, I'm still seeing vehicles that are $25,000 or $30,000 or more. And yes, this is a drastic price reduction from what the new models are currently selling at today. But what if you're willing to pivot and you're willing to look at a vehicle that's not a Jeep? Say you're willing to look at America's most popular selling SUV, which happens to be the Toyota RAV4. The RAV4 actually has a starting price of just $28,000. And if you look up gently used RAV4s, in the 3, 4, and 5-year-old range, again, you see vehicles from the low 20s all the way up to $30,000. Now, a couple things to note about price. That's actually not much of a drop from new, at least from the base model perspective, but also, more importantly, a new Toyota RAV4 is cheaper than many of the used Jeeps. So when I look at it from this stance, it's very hard to say that purchasing used is always better than new. And this is just personal preference, but if I can get a new vehicle for say $2,000 or $3,000 more than a used vehicle, I'm gonna go with the new vehicle. However, if we start talking about say $10,000 or a $15,000 difference, that's a whole different story. To me, that moves the needle enough to justify buying the used vehicle. But let's say my budget for buying a vehicle is $28,000. I would personally rather look for a new vehicle that fits within that budget rather than a used vehicle. I think it's very important that we discuss brand and model because those factor hugely into price, and you can actually find vehicles that are less expensive than the Toyota RAV4, some even from Toyota themselves. The Toyota Corolla has a base price of just $22,000. And I'm not saying that Toyota is the only affordable brand out there. There's actually quite a few brands. But if you're looking at a Lexus, it's going to be more expensive than a Honda. If you're looking at a Jeep, it's going to be more expensive than, say, a Toyota. I think when it comes to buying a vehicle, whether new or used, there are a handful of things you want to consider. Brand. This is where I think having the attitude that used is always better than new is a little flawed. Because if I can get a new vehicle at a lower price than a used vehicle, I don't necessarily think that used is the better choice. Now, of course, you are going to have the argument that as you compare different vehicle types and different brands, you're not necessarily doing an apples to apples comparison. And if you have your heart set on a very specific brand of vehicle, it very well could be that going the used route is the better choice. In that situation, maybe going the used route saves you several thousands of dollars. However, if you're willing to consider a more modest vehicle brand like a Toyota or a Honda, you might find that new is well within your budget. The brand of vehicle you're looking at is going to have a profound impact on the price tag of that vehicle. Of course, at the top of the list, we want affordability to be our primary consideration. You have to know what your budget is and how much vehicle you can afford. The general rule when it comes to financing a car is 20, 4, and 10, where you put 20% down, finance for no more than 4 years, and your payments are no more than 10% of your income. So let's stick with the theme of buying that brand new Toyota RAV4. Let's say you find a model for $30,000, you put 20% down or $6,000 and finance $24,000. That would leave you with a monthly payment of about $553 a month on a 4-year loan, meaning that you should have an income of at least $5,530 a month to afford this vehicle. And if you don't fit these parameters, it doesn't mean you extend the loan to make those payments more affordable. You attack it from a different angle. You look for a less expensive vehicle, you work on boosting your income, or you save more for that down payment. Now, my mom drilled into my mind as I was growing up that your auto loan should never extend beyond 3 years, and it should be around $300. Granted, she did say that about a decade or so ago, so I should probably index that number for inflation. But either way, it makes me look at the industry guideline of that 24 and 10 as the absolute max anyone should ever go to. When it comes to buying a vehicle, if you can buy one without financing, meaning you can buy it outright in cash, I actually think that's better. Because why do you want to take out financing or make payments on a depreciating asset? I think the best thing you can do is save up so when it comes time to buy a vehicle, that you can buy this vehicle outright in cash. Now, I do understand that most people are not in this position, especially early on in their working career, and a car may be a necessity. You may need a car to get to and from work in order to earn a paycheck. So maybe early on in your career, maybe you follow these financing parameters when it comes to your auto loan. But then maybe as you get more working years under your belt, you save in a way that allows you to buy your following cars or the next cars down the road using the all cash method. How long you own a vehicle is a huge contributing factor. As I said, my vehicle is 16 years old and still running strong, and I absolutely love it. I plan on driving that vehicle until it doesn't want to be driven anymore. And personally, I think this is a really great attitude when it comes to vehicle ownership. When I purchased my vehicle 16 years ago, it was about $23,000, and as I said, I purchased new at the time. But I don't think that was a financial mistake. That vehicle is still with me today. I think that's the attitude you should have when you go into buying a vehicle. Have the intent of owning it as long as possible, for a minimum of 10 years, maybe longer. With this kind of mindset, when I look at buying a vehicle and say there's a new one for $28,000 or a used one for $26,000, I'm more inclined to choose the new one. Yes, the new one might be $2,000 more expensive, but if my intent is to keep this vehicle for 10 years or more, $2,000 is really negligible. Often when you're looking at a vehicle, you might consider that the price tag is what it costs to own the vehicle. But there's more to it than that. You have to consider the cost of fuel or electricity, insurance, maintenance, repairs. Edmunds actually has a really cool calculator to calculate the true cost of ownership on the first 5 years of a vehicle's life that I will link down below if you're interested. And if we again compare the Jeep Grand Cherokee to, say, the Toyota RAV4, you can see not only does the Jeep Grand Cherokee come with a higher price tag, it also comes with higher maintenance costs, higher repair costs, and higher insurance costs, and greater depreciation. And all of these are factors you should consider when it comes to buying a vehicle. The other important factor to keep in mind is the purpose of a vehicle. A vehicle is a depreciating asset. It is not an investment. The purpose of a vehicle is to get you where you need to go safely and reliably. That's it. The team over at Ramsey Solutions did the largest study of millionaires ever done and found that the vast majority of them drive typical, average, everyday cars. Most millionaires don't drive flashy cars. When people don't waste money to look wealthy, they have money to actually become wealthy. If you keep that attitude in mind, you might be more likely to consider a modest style vehicle. And these modest style vehicles are inherently more affordable. And you might just find that a modest vehicle, even brand new, is well within your budget. Many people use their vehicle as a status symbol. They choose a high-end model or a luxury model to say, hey, look at me, I've made it. But needless to say, spending $50,000 on a status symbol that nobody's really looking at anyway is a big waste of money. A $30,000 vehicle can get you to all the same places that a $60,000 vehicle can. Should you never ever buy a new vehicle? Is used always the best choice? Not necessarily. I think if you're in the financial position to purchase a new vehicle, I think a new vehicle can be a fine choice. Yes, it's probably true that you could always find a used vehicle of some type that is cheaper than new. But what matters most is that you stick to your budget. Because remember, finance is personal and it's your money. You work hard for it. So make sure you're spending it in a way that makes you happy and brings you joy. What's your take? When it comes to buying a vehicle, do you go new or do you go used? Leave your thoughts in a comment down below. I post new videos every single week. If you got anything at all out of this one, please give it a like. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, or if you know of someone who might get something out of this type of content, please consider sharing. I'll see you soon. Bye.